Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome to the poem of the day for today, Sunday, August 31st, 2025. So, I actually already recorded this, and as it was uploading, I got two error messages, and then the video was gone. So, I don't really know where it went or what happened to it, but I have enough time today that I'm going to go ahead and just record it again. So, we've reached part 7, the final part of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And throughout this poem, there have been a number of thematic and plot-based questions that have been created for us that have not been resolved just yet, that are borne out within part 7. Some of those have to do with the relationship between humans and nature, the consequences of sin or transgression, especially in terms of the destruction of nature, the ambiguity of nature as a force, whether it is something that is sublime and transcendent and salvific, or if it's something that is abysmal and terrifying and has the capacity for annihilation, or both of those things. We have a talk in here about the relationship between humans, an individual human, and the society or the larger civilization. We have a question about knowledge and experience and whether you can trust your senses and your imagination, whether the things that one is seeing, like the mariner sees in here, is something that's a matter of being deprived of company and food and sleep and water, or whether at the far reaches of the earth, these supernatural things do make themselves known and visible to us. And just from a plot standpoint, we have to wonder how the mariner got to where he did, interrupting the wedding, and why he is telling this really long story, and if the curse is still upon him or not. And so, where we last left off, there was a boat approaching the mariner on the ship that had a pilot and the pilot's boy, and then a hermit as well. And that was the end of part 6, where he was hoping that the hermit would be able to sort of wash away his sins, wash away the albatross's blood from him. So this is part 7 of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner from 1798 by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The hermit good lives in that wood, which slopes down to the sea. How loudly his voice he rears. He loves to talk with mariners that come from a far country. He kneels at morn and noon and eve. He hath a cushion plump. It is the moss that wholly hides the rotted old oak stump. The skiff boat neared. I heard them talk. Why, this is strange, I trow. Where are those lights, so many and fair, that signal made but now? Strange, by my faith, the hermit said, and they answered not our cheer. The planks looked warped, and see those sails, how thin they are and sere. I never saw aught like to them, unless perchance it were brown skeletons of leaves that lag my forest brook along, when the ivy tod is heavy with snow, and the owlet whoops to the wolf below, that eats the she-wolf's young. Dear Lord, it hath a fiendish look, the pilot made reply. I am afeard. Push on, said the hermit cheerily. The boat came closer to the ship, but I nor spake nor stirred. The boat came close beneath the ship, and straight a sound was heard. Under the water it rumbled on, still louder and more dread. It reached the ship, it split the bay. The ship went down like lead. Stunned by that loud and dreadful sound, which sky and ocean smote, like one that hath been 7 days drowned, my body lay afloat. But swift as dreams, myself I found within the pilot's boat. Upon the whirl, where sank the ship, the boat spun round, and all was still save that the hill was telling of the sound. I moved my lips. The pilot shrieked and fell down in a fit. The holy hermit raised his eyes and prayed where he did sit. I took the oars. The pilot's boy, who now doth crazy go, laughed loud and long, and all the while his eyes went to and fro. Ha ha, quoth he, full plain I see the devil knows how to row. And now, all in my own country, I stood on the firm land. The hermit stepped forth from the boat, and scarcely could he stand. Oh, shrieve me, holy man, the hermit crossed his brow. Say quick, quoth he, I bid thee say, what manner of man art thou? Forthwith this frame of mine was wrenched with woeful agony, which forced me to begin my tale, and then it left me free. Since then at an uncertain hour that agony returns, and till my ghastly tale is told, this heart within me burns. I pass, like night, from land to land. I have strange power of speech. That moment that his face I see, I know the man that must hear me. To him my tale I teach. What loud uproar bursts from that door? The wedding guests are there. But in the garden bower the bride and bridemaids singing are. And hark the little vesper bell which biddeth me to prayer. O wedding guest, this soul hath been alone on a wide, wide sea. So lonely 'twas that God himself scarce seemed there to be. O sweeter than the marriage feast, 'tis sweeter far to me, to walk together to the kirk with a goodly company. To walk together to the kirk and all together pray, while each to his great Father bends, old men and babes, and loving friends, and youths and maidens gay. Farewell, farewell, but this I tell to thee, thou wedding guest, he prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. He prayeth best who loveth best all things both great and small. For the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. The mariner whose eye is bright, whose beard with age is hoar, is gone. And now the wedding guest turned from the bridegroom's door. He went like one that hath been stunned, and is of sense forlorn. A sadder and a wiser man, he rose the morrow morn. All right. So congratulations, we made it through this longer narrative poem. It's not an epic, but it's 625 lines, which is by far the longest poem that we've done on here. And we took it piece by piece through the 7 parts. And to speak briefly about this 7th part, the mariner is able to get off the ship onto the smaller boat with the pilot and the pilot's boy and the hermit, who, now reading this again, I realized is actually a holy man. Previously, I thought that he was just ostracized or an outcast from society, a poor person who lived alone, possibly nomadic was sort of what I was thinking. But he is actually explicitly referred to in here as a holy man, so we can think of him as still, again, poor and separated, but perhaps a monk. And so the mariner gets on their boat, and immediately his ship sinks. It drops, it says, like a stone or like lead, which creates a kind of whirlpool that they get caught up in for a moment, which I think suggests that the depth of the mariner's sin and transgression almost pulls other people in as well. It's almost the cause of their destruction and not just his own penance. And so he immediately asks the hermit to shrieve him, to hear his confession, and to absolve him of the penance. And while he immediately feels, he says, it left me free, around line 581, free of the woeful agony. The forgiveness, the expiation is only temporary. And not in the sense of the curse necessarily, but in the sense of the feeling of guilt or shame that goes with him. If we believe that the hermit did absolve him of this sin, then the mariner himself has not, has not been able to get over it, because he describes right afterward that at an uncertain hour the agony returns and the heart within me burns. So it's kind of a temporary reprieve, and then after a while he will have the need to tell his story again. And the confessional aspect of that gives him some sort of relief. And he at least tells us, but he at least tells himself that, I have a strange power of speech. That moment that his face I see, I know the man that must hear me. To him my tale I teach. So what he's describing there is that he gets this burning within his heart of the shame and the guilt from his sin and his penance. And so he feels the need to confess again, but he finds someone, and just by looking at their face, he can tell that this person needs to hear his story. And that the moral of the story, as we find out in about line 610, he tells kind of twice that a good person who honors God, who prayeth well, should love man and bird and beast. And by using that syntactical structure with the repeated ands in there, he is leveling or suggesting an equality among humans and animals. And then he reiterates that the one who loveth best loves both things great and small, for God who loveth us made and loves all. And so the moral of the story is basically against the traditional reading of the creation story in Genesis, at least from a Christian's perspective, which is the idea that God gives man dominion over nature and over animals. A logic of which has led us to ecological disasters, wherein we think that we can just kind of use and abuse and violate nature to whatever productive ends that we see fit. And so the Rime of the Ancient Mariner seems to be a warning against that, that there is a kind of karmic balance within nature that it will strike back. It will curse us. And I think you could read this again from an ecological perspective as relevant towards climate change and the climate crisis right now. That, it's not exactly shooting albatrosses, but this willy-nilly destruction of nature for no particular purpose or reason is going to come back to haunt us. And I think that's part of the reason why this is still such a powerful and resonant poem. One last thing I want to say that I find to be a fascinating, if frustrating, ambiguity of the poem. And one of the things I love about poetry is that it is open-ended and it's ambiguous, and it doesn't give you easy and tight closure and answer all of your questions. The mariner says that he can, by looking at someone's face, know that they need to hear his story. And so he tells it to the wedding guest. And the last stanza tells us that the wedding guest, he went like one who hath been stunned, and is of sense forlorn. A sadder and wiser man, he rose the morrow morn. Why does the wedding guest need to hear this story? What is the nature of that reaction? If he's stunned and forlorn and sad, it seems like he learned something that he didn't really want to hear. And so I really want to know what type of person he is and what his attitude towards nature was, or what he's hearing out of this story that is so difficult for him to accept. And it's a knowledge that he needs to have, the poem tells us, because he's a wiser man, but he's a sadder one. And so there's some melancholy at the end where, and personally I think this is true, that the wiser you get, the more you at least tend towards sadness, because there's so many sad truths about human nature and what humans are inclined to do that it becomes hard to take that all with simplicity and joy. But why this wedding guest? Why did he need to hear this? And for what reason is this affecting him so much? What does it say about who he is? And perhaps the ambiguity of that allows us to project ourselves into it. Perhaps it makes us think about ourselves and our own relationships to nature, and to what degree we abuse that, and to what degree we think we are sort of getting away with it. Those are just some last reflections on my part. I thank you all for joining us again, and hopefully you joined us for the whole series here. I hope to continue doing longer, slower reads like this and focusing on specific authors for several days in a row. But until then, until next time, have a restorative and restful Sunday, and I wish you peace.